Hi everyone, my name is Sarah Kong. I'm a Microsoft Technical Trainer and a Microsoft Certified Trainer, and we're here with the AZ-104 Exam Prep Series. This series actually focuses on the last section, which is the monitor and maintain Azure resources. So what we're going to need to know for the exam for this is, how you monitor your resources, what you would use, and then how do you back up and, protect those resources. So as you can see in this objective domain, there's a few things that you need to know for the exam, and I'm going to walk you through that. So first things first is, how do you work with Azure Monitor? The way I always look at it is, remember, it's three things, right? You've got your metrics versus your log analytics, right? Versus your alerts. So know when I would use one over the other. So know the difference between the three and how to configure those three. Know that you can connect to, Azure Monitor can connect to anything, right? Other clouds, on premises, be aware of that. And then how you would configure those log settings, right? So how I can go in and I can go into Azure Monitor, how I can analyze those logs, how I can create pretty dashboards, right? So be aware of how you can do that. How I set up alerts. Know that alerts require an action group. What is an action group? Well, an action group can be an SMS text. It could be an email message. It can send it to a custom a piece of code, right, running in Azure automation. So know that the action groups and where they can go when you configure an alert. Also, how you configure and interpret or monitor these VMs. So how I can work with application insights. Application insights, you won't get heavily tested on that, but know that is another component of monitoring to monitor those applications, right? So working with your development code, right? And that's one of the pieces that application insights can monitor. So another big piece of monitoring is going to be Network Watcher, as opposed to like what you needed to know for the virtual network piece. You also still need to know this for the monitoring section. So all of this, right? I can't stress enough going into the portal yourself, getting that hands-on, and going through each single one of these components, right? So going through the portal, working through all of that. The other one is the connection monitor. So how do you configure that? Again, that's all part of the Network Watcher. So go into the portal, get your hands-on learning with that to pass that piece in the exam. Recovery Vault. This is another big component. The Recovery Vault is your backup solution, but be aware that Recovery Vault is also part of the ASR. Now, the Azure Site Recovery is mainly focused in the AZ-104 course. However, you might see some questions in the exam about replication, right? So replicating your VMs, and that's part of the Azure Site Recovery, which is both of these are part of the Recovery Vault. So the Recovery Vault, again, is broken down into two components, your backups and your ASR. Right? And then be aware too that when you create these backup vaults, you can look for them under the services, you can create them, and then you can manage all of these. And also be aware of there is a backup service tool, right, in the portal where you can see all of your recovery vaults in one screen. Right? So be aware of all of the different types of configurations with the Azure Backup Vault. And then also be aware of the policies, right? So the policies are going to be like, how often are you going to be backing up? Daily, monthly, yearly, sorry. And then are you retaining those backups? So be aware of all the configurations that you can do within your policies, right? And then how do you perform these? So what are the permissions I need? Right? That's a big one, like with any of our services in Azure, right? So what are the IAM permissions that I can configure to give that ability to be able to back up and also restore? Because you might want people to be able to only back up or only to be able to restore, vice versa. Right? How do you create that recovery vault? And then what I said earlier in a couple slides back is that within the recovery part, they have the Azure Site Recovery, right? And the Azure Site Recovery has a component to be able to replicate, right? So doing that replicate, and this is when you want region failover. So know the difference between, creating a single backup of your VMs and why you would do that, as opposed to going in and doing replication, which is your regional failover, so you're more of your disaster recovery. Understand the difference of the two, right? And this is where you can see that in here. So performing that failover to a secondary region, and that's using the Azure Site Recovery, all still part of the backup vault. Right? So it's all one service, right? Backup vault, and then you've got your ASR and your backups in there. So again, know the difference between the two. Know that how to set up those configurations, those settings for that replication in the ASR. So other skills that you'll need to know. So how you configure your Azure Site Recovery for those Azure resources, and how to interpret reports and alerts. So to recap this, with the monitoring, know alerts versus log analytics, right? Versus the metrics. Right? And that's all part of your Azure Monitor. So know the difference between the three when you would use one over the other. No Network Watcher. Like I said, go into the portal, fiddle with it, right? Go into each section and actually do some configurations and see how it works. And then with backup recovery, know that it's a single recovery vault, right? So think of it as a hierarchy. If I have a recovery vault, and then under there, I've got my backups, and I've also got my ASR. ASR, I can do replication, right? So with the ASR component, remember that this is replication to another region. And what you should know by now is, and hopefully you know, is that backups is within a region. So if I want to back up a VM, that it has to be within the same region as that recovery vault.